Welcome to District Command Central, your go-to source for the latest news and updates on the Washington Commanders. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a play. All right, Commanders fans, buckle up, because we might be heading toward one of those off-seasons that ends up defining the next 5 years of Washington football. You know the kind I'm talking about, the type of off-season where one decision, one move, one headline changes everything. And this time, it's not about who's coming in. It's about who might be leaving. There's a new buzz floating around Commanders Park, a whisper from inside the building. And according to one of the most trusted insiders around, we could be in for a real shocker once the 2025 season wraps up. Yeah, we're talking about a potential blockbuster, a move that could see one of Washington's cornerstone defensive players packing his bags before 2026 even kicks off. And that player, my friends, is Daron Payne. Now, before we get into the meat of this story, let's rewind a little bit. Let's look at where the Commanders are right now, because context matters. 8 weeks into the 2025 season, and Washington's sitting at 3-5. Not a disaster, not a total meltdown, but far from the Super Bowl contender that fans thought they'd see after Adam Peters went all-in last offseason. Remember those bold moves? Marshawn Lattimore, Deebo Samuel Sr., Laramie Tunsil, 3 big names, 3 expensive additions. Peters went shopping like a GM with a mission, trying to inject star power and leadership into a roster that, on paper, looked ready to make some noise. But football isn't played on paper. Injuries hit, regression set in, and suddenly this team that was supposed to be punching above its weight looks more like it's swinging in the dark. And because of those trades, Washington's draft capital in 2026 looks thinner than a wallet after a Vegas weekend. Only 6 picks left. Not exactly a comfortable spot for a team that still needs depth across the board. So when ESPN's John Keim, a guy who's been plugged into this organization for years, starts hinting at something major brewing for 2026, you take notice. Keim isn't one of those talking heads throwing spaghetti at the wall. When he says something, it's because people in the building are actually whispering it. And according to him, there's a chance, a real chance, that Washington could be open to trade offers for Daron Payne once this season ends. Let that sink in for a second. We're talking about a Pro Bowl defensive tackle, a guy who's become the emotional and physical anchor of this defensive front. The same Daron Payne who's been one of the Commanders' few consistent bright spots in a season full of disappointment. But here's the thing. Football, and especially roster management, is always about timing and money. Payne's got 1 year left on his deal after this season, and that's when things start to get complicated. On the field, Payne's playing some of the best football of his career. He's become the alpha dog in that defensive line room, especially with Jonathan Allen dealing with nagging injuries and an inevitable decline in snaps. Payne's been disruptive, powerful, and honestly, a nightmare for opposing offensive lines. He's flashing those dominant traits everyone saw glimpses of when he came out of Alabama. But there's also another layer here. He's playing for another payday. And if you've followed Daron Payne's career, you know that when there's money on the line, he brings his A-game. We saw this movie back in 2022. Payne went off that year. 11.5 sacks, countless pressures, a Pro Bowl nod, and a well-deserved monster contract that looked like it was going to lock him down as a cornerstone of Washington's defense for years to come. But after that deal, his performance dipped. It wasn't a total collapse, but it wasn't that same relentless, every-snap dominance we saw when the contract was still on the horizon. And that's what's making Adam Peters think long and hard about whether he wants to go down that road again. The Commanders' front office can't afford to overpay for nostalgia or for potential that only shows up every other year. And that's where this potential trade talk starts to make sense. The Commanders are stuck in this weird middle ground. Not bad enough to tear it all down, not good enough to go all in again. They've got stars, sure, but they've also got holes. No second-round pick. No fourth-round pick in 2026. Limited flexibility. And Peters, as aggressive as he's been, isn't reckless. He knows he can't keep mortgaging the future just to chase a wild card spot. So imagine this scenario. Washington finishes the 2025 season outside the playoff picture again. Payne wants a new deal that resets the market for interior defensive linemen. Peters looks at the salary cap, looks at the team's needs, and decides that trading Payne while his value's still sky-high might be the smarter play. From a financial standpoint, the math is pretty straightforward. Trading Payne next offseason would save Washington about $16.81 million against the cap. That's a massive chunk of change, money that could go toward locking up younger players, retooling the offensive line, or maybe even finding a long-term quarterback solution if the current experiment doesn't pan out. There's also $11.2 million in dead money that would sting, no doubt, but the savings could outweigh the pain if it means positioning the team better for the long haul. And let's be real, there will be a market for Payne. Dominant defensive tackles don't grow on trees. You put a guy like him on the trade block, and teams start calling. Imagine the Bills, the Lions, maybe even the Bears. All teams looking for that one elite interior presence to push them over the top. Now, fans won't like hearing this, because Payne isn't just a name on the roster. He's a fan favorite, a warrior, a guy who's been part of this team's identity since the days when FedEx Field felt more like a graveyard than a home. Losing him would hurt, no question about it. But you also can't build a consistent contender if you're too afraid to move on from key pieces at the right time. Peters has already shown he's not sentimental about the past. He's already moved off some of the previous regime's guys. This could just be the next logical step. One more piece of the old Washington being phased out in favor of something new. Of course, everything depends on how this season finishes. If the Commanders somehow turn things around, sneak into the playoffs, and look like a team on the rise, maybe Peters thinks twice. Maybe he decides that Payne's presence is too important to the locker room, that his leadership and chemistry with Allen are worth another year of investment. But if the struggles continue, if the defense keeps getting gashed, and if the offense can't stay on the field long enough to give them a break, then expect the whispers to turn into full-blown rumors. Because make no mistake, this isn't just about Payne. This is about the identity of the franchise going forward. Peters is building a team in his image, smart, disciplined, flexible, and that means every big contract, every veteran leader, is under review. So what does this all mean for Commanders fans heading into 2026? It means get ready for another roller coaster. Because this franchise, for better or worse, doesn't do quiet off-seasons. There's always drama, always a headline, always something brewing behind closed doors. And if Darren Payne really does hit the trade block, the ripple effects could be enormous. It would open up cap space, yes, but it would also signal that Washington is fully committed to reshaping its core. It could mean investing more heavily in the offense, doubling down on a new defensive scheme, or even starting to prepare for life beyond some of the current veteran stars. It could also mean that the Commanders are done patching holes and ready to build something sustainable from the ground up. But let's not get it twisted. This wouldn't just be a business move. Payne is a tone setter, and his departure would be felt in every corner of that locker room. Jonathan Allen, who's been his partner in crime for years, might see it as a sign that his own time could be winding down. The young guys, the rookies coming up the ranks, would get the message loud and clear: no one's untouchable. And that, in a strange way, might be exactly what Peters wants. A team full of hungry players who know that every snap, every rep, every game counts toward proving they belong in the new era of Washington football. So, whether this deal actually happens or not, the mere fact that it's being talked about tells you everything you need to know about where this organization is heading. The Commanders are done living in the past. They're done clinging to names and memories. They're focused on the future, and if that future doesn't include Darren Payne, it'll be because Adam Peters believes that the path to contention runs through flexibility, not familiarity. The next few months will be crucial, and if the insider chatter is any indication, the 2026 offseason could be the most unpredictable we've seen in Washington in a long, long time. So buckle up, Commanders Nation. The storm's coming, and whether it brings renewal or more chaos, one thing's for sure: nobody's safe when a GM with vision starts thinking long-term. If you're enjoying the coverage, make sure to smash that like button and drop a comment with your thoughts on the Commanders' latest moves. We want to hear from you. Explosive rumors are shaking the NFL to its very core this week, and the epicenter? Washington Commanders. Yes, you heard that right. What started as a whisper in locker rooms and social media threads has now erupted into a full-blown firestorm after none other than Dan Quinn, the fiery and outspoken defensive mind, seemingly detonated a bombshell that's sending shockwaves through fans, analysts, and even rival teams. Nobody on this team wants him back. Quinn reportedly shouted in what insiders are calling a rare, no-holds-barred press confrontation. And just like that, the entire Commanders organization, already under intense scrutiny, has found itself in the middle of one of the most combustible controversies in recent NFL history. It's the kind of headline you don't just scroll past. It grabs you, shakes you, and forces you to reconsider everything you thought you knew about the dynamics inside Washington's locker room. Sources close to the team are hinting that Quinn's outburst didn't happen in isolation. Apparently, tensions have been simmering for months, ever since certain decisions in the front office started rubbing players and coaches the wrong way. The him in question is reportedly a former star, or at least a highly scrutinized former starter, whose relationship with teammates and staff has been complicated, to say the least. Some say it's personal. Some say it's strategic. Whatever the angle, Quinn's words make one thing abundantly clear. The Commanders are drawing a line in the sand, and they aren't interested in looking back. It's rare to see a coach, especially one as disciplined and measured as Quinn has been throughout his career, let emotion spill so visibly. That alone has fans and pundits buzzing, questioning the internal politics that could be shaping the team's next chapter. Interestingly, the timing of Quinn's explosion couldn't be more volatile. The Commanders are in a transitional phase, trying to balance rebuilding efforts with the expectations of a fan base that refuses to settle for mediocrity. Every decision is scrutinized, every roster move analyzed under a microscope, and every rumor, especially one as incendiary as this, has the potential to influence locker room morale. While Quinn is known for his defensive genius, his public declaration has put him at the center of a media storm, effectively shifting the narrative from X's and O's on the field to a drama-filled saga of alliances, betrayals, and perhaps even revenge. Analysts are speculating whether this marks a permanent fracture within the organization or is merely a calculated message meant to send a signal to both players and rivals alike. Either way, the buzz is palpable, and social media has exploded with speculation, memes, and hot takes that range from incredulity to outright panic among the fan base. The identity of the player in question has become the subject of fevered debate across sports talk shows and fan forums. While some argue it's a former quarterback whose tenure was marred by inconsistency, others suggest it could be a defensively versatile star whose personal issues have overshadowed professional contributions. The mystery only fuels the rumor mill further, making Quinn's outburst feel less like a statement and more like a spark thrown into a powder keg. And let's be honest, the NFL thrives on drama as much as it does on athletic excellence. A story like this doesn't just affect Washington, it ripples across the entire league. Rival teams are undoubtedly watching closely, weighing how internal discord might shift competitive dynamics. Could this chaos be a hidden advantage, or is it a ticking time bomb for the Commanders' ambitions? The truth, as always, is somewhere in between, but the intrigue is irresistible. From a strategic standpoint, Quinn's candor may have been an attempt to galvanize the locker room. Coaches often talk about accountability and culture, but rarely do they make declarations so pointed that everyone in the building, players, assistants, and even front office executives, cannot ignore the message. The sentiment is clear. The team is committed to a vision, and anyone who doesn't fit that vision is considered a liability, not an asset. The optics of such a statement are fascinating, and they raise questions about how the Commanders' leadership navigates the delicate balance between discipline and dissent. There's also the fan perspective to consider. For decades, Washington has had a fan base that oscillates between boundless hope and crushing disappointment, and a public blow-up like Quinn's only intensifies that emotional roller coaster. Social media reactions range from, finally, someone saying what we all feel, to this could be the end of locker room harmony as we know it. Meanwhile, insiders claim that the tension doesn't stop at Quinn's explosive comment. Rumor has it that meetings behind closed doors have been heated, with multiple staff members voicing frustrations that, until now, had been carefully contained. Some players, sources say, are reportedly divided, some backing Quinn's hardline stance, others quietly lamenting the disruption and the potential impact on team chemistry. And don't forget, the media loves a narrative with multiple layers of conflict. Every press conference, every tweet, every seemingly innocuous roster decision is now being dissected through the lens of this revelation. Will the him stay away from Washington permanently? Will Quinn's bold proclamation unify the locker room or further fracture it? Nobody knows for sure, but the speculation is running wild. The ripple effect of Quinn's remarks is not limited to internal affairs. Betting lines, fantasy leagues, and analyst predictions have all shifted overnight as commentators try to quantify the intangible impact of a coach publicly declaring that a player is unwelcome. A statement like this doesn't just affect a team's identity. It affects market perception, fan engagement, and even sponsorship deals. Every organization in the NFL now watches closely to see how Washington handles the fallout, because there's a lesson here about leadership, culture, and the power of words in professional sports. In some ways, Quinn's outburst is as much about optics as it is about principle. It's a dramatic assertion that the Commanders are a team with standards, and anyone who fails to meet them may face public consequences. That message alone is enough to dominate headlines for weeks, if not months, making the current situation a must-follow saga for anyone invested in NFL drama. As the dust settles, or at least temporarily, the question remains, what comes next? The Commanders face critical games ahead, and the team's performance on the field will likely determine whether Quinn's fiery stance was a masterstroke or a misstep. Coaches thrive on motivation, and players respond to energy, but internal friction of this magnitude is a delicate balancing act. Will the locker room rally around Quinn's declaration, or will whispers of discontent turn into a storm? And as the rumors circulate, one thing is undeniable. Washington is a team under a microscope like never before. Fans, commentators, and rival teams alike are glued to every development, waiting for the next twist in what has become one of the most sensational off-field stories in recent memory. Quinn's words have lit a fuse, and whether it leads to fireworks or fallout, the NFL world will be watching closely, eager to see how this dramatic chapter in the Commanders' saga unfolds. The intrigue doesn't end here. Every meeting, every sideline interaction, every interview could hold the next revelation. The rumor mill is alive, and speculation is running rampant. Who will step up? Who will fold? And most importantly, how will this unprecedented public declaration reshape Washington's culture moving forward? For fans who thrive on drama, tension, and a little chaos, this is a story that will continue to dominate conversations. Dan Quinn has thrown down the gauntlet, and Washington Commanders, and indeed the entire NFL, may never look at locker room dynamics the same way again. The rumor is just the beginning, but the implications are enormous, and every twist and turn will be scrutinized under a microscope by fans, journalists, and analysts alike. The saga is far from over, and one thing is clear. In the world of professional football, nothing sparks conversation quite like a coach willing to speak the unspeakable. Thanks for tuning into District Command Central. Make sure to subscribe and follow us for all the Commanders news you need. Until next time, keep the faith and hail to the Commanders.